Okay, so once you open up Photoshop and you're ready to bring in your Illustrator, you can open up a new file and navigate to your folder where you've saved your Illustrator file. So I'm going to bring in my riffsections.ai and just drag it in like so. And you can just leave these settings the way they are and press OK. Okay, so as you can see, everything is looking the same as it was in Illustrator, which is perfect. And now I'm going to organize my Photoshop layers. So I'm going to make some folders. One of them is going to be a fill layer. One is going to be like people and animals. I'm going to do like a ground. Actually, that will probably go in the fill layer, but the grounds will go in fill. A background layer, which will have the sky in it, and assets. So that will be the grass, the trees, any materials that I want to add. And once that's kind of ready to go, I'm going to keep my Illustrator file at the top. So anything I add will go into the background of this line work, and that will be up front. So once you have it brought in, I'm going to go back and open up the actual file that I used just so you can see, but that's kind of how you want to set up your file. So this is what the final result looked like. As you can see, I pretty much just have my layers organized like this. I actually didn't add a sky, so I don't have a background layer, but we're going to add it just so you can see how that works. So to add a sky, which will be kind of the first learning experience, is just figuring out how to select the sky in general. So I'll do one of these just to start. Let's go with this one here. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a selection so that I can make sure that my sky is not covering up or you can't see it through this boardwalk. So I'm going to go into my polygonal lasso, and I'm going to zoom in and just select the things that I know that I want to delete the sky away from. So things like the ground. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's probably going to be faint enough anyways that you won't be able to see small mistakes, but we can just go through this. Now this is an open railing, so the sky can be seen through that, but I don't want you to be able to see the sky through there. So once I have my selection, I'm going to go to Select and Save Selection. Now this is going to be called, I have 5 sections and I've labeled them A, B, C, D, E. So this will be CC section sky. You can exit out of that by pressing Control D. And I'm going to bring in my sky now. So I have saved my sky to my downloads, but you can go through your assets folder that Stephanie gave you and just pick a sky that you like and drag and drop it in. So that looks great. I'm just going to resize it to my box and just press enter. Now this sky can go into my background layer. And I'm just going to rename it because I hate these file names so that I know that this is my sky. And I'm going to just reduce the opacity by a lot. And I might actually move it up like so. I'm going to press Control T to transform. I just kind of want this blue part to be more at the top. Great. Now I want to select away. See, as you can see, since the boardwalk has, the wood slats have kind of a reduced transparency, you can see the sky through them. So I'm just going to make a layer mask on the sky and go to Select, Load Selection. And I'm going to look for my CC section sky. Now I can go and right click on here and select inverse and press delete. Oops, it was already selected the inverse, so here we go. Now I can go ahead and get rid of the sky outside of my bounding area just by so making sure my layer mask is still selected. And you can actually hold Shift so you can select more than one thing at once. Let's go past there. So there we go. Now it's still a little bit too opaque for me, so I'm going to reduce that a little bit, and I might even just use the eraser by pressing E and giving that a low opacity and a less hard brush. Just kind of like erase some of this a little bit more. Great. So that is how you would add a kind of texture and get rid of things around your line work. To add the ground, what I did was I just kind of drew a rectangle where I wanted it and just used a new fill layer and used the brush. Or you can also just like fill this by right clicking and doing fill. And you want to select a color. So I did something like gray. Just press OK. Oops, that's on this. Okay, and then what I did was probably reduce the opacity and just go ahead and erase. So it had a nice faded edge. So that's what I did there. I'm just going to delete that. And I'm going to delete this guy because I don't want it in these sections. Now, I'm just going to go through the kind of file organization here quickly. So I have my animals and people in an animals and people folder. I've divided them into the individual sections so I know which ones I'm talking about when I'm clicking around. I have an extra line work, which just has one line that I decided that I wanted to add right here. So that is in its own extra line work folder. The fill is the faded ground. And there's nothing in backgrounds now, but then I have my sections assets folder. So I have the wood, the grass, and the trees. And these are also divided into each section. So for example, this section here has slats that you can see through, but then I know that there were parts that there were slats behind these slats, and so you wouldn't actually be able to see anything in the background. So I have two different files. I have the closed and the open slats. The open slats I edited in Photoshop and got rid of the space in between so that I can manipulate which slats you can actually see through and which ones you can't. And then I just kind of put them in, added a layer mask, and deleted based on the line work that I had in Illustrator. For the grass, it's the same thing. I added in a grass texture. I wanted it to be, this is kind of a point at which you really want to decide if your site has specific species, if it has a specific kind of type of vegetation. Is it in a forest with dense coniferous trees and ferns on the ground, or is this up to you and you can do kind of light, airy trees and flowery, loose grass? So I decided I didn't have any trees on my site, which I didn't. It was an airport, so I could kind of go with whatever I wanted. So I knew that I wanted light, flowy trees with lots of dappled shade coming through and loose grass. So you want to be specific about which kind of trees you pick, and you can kind of go to your site, figure out roughly what kind of tree it is. You can use an app to figure out and look for an asset online that will fit that exact tree type. Even if you can't figure out the exact tree, it's pretty clear when it's like a super dense oak tree with tons of leaves and it's casting a lot of shade versus like a honey locust tree that's a little bit more dappled shade. So you would want to be specific about what you're putting in your sections and your plans. So here I have two different kinds of trees. You can have more than that, but these were really small sections. So I just have two different types of trees. And I've put them in, again, based on folders, and added layer masks so that I can cut away parts that are kind of extending past the section, or I wanted to cut away, let's say, this tree. I wanted to cut away where it's behind the slats, whereas this tree is kind of on a different layer, so it's in front of the slats. So you can kind of use the layer mask just to edit the trees, and then you can just copy them over and get rid of the mask and start again so that you don't have to bring in a new file each time. for the tree. And for the grass, it's the same thing. I brought in a grass. Let's see if I delete this. This was just a picture from Stephanie's asset folder, and I liked this kind of grass here. So I added a layer mask and used kind of a grass brush that I don't actually have loaded on here on the Windows version of Photoshop. But on my Mac, I had all of Stephanie's grass brushes, and I just went away with my layer mask and erased to give it like a grass looking texture. And the last thing that I did was add people and birds. And I kind of referenced my Rhino file just to see how tall the people were going to be. And that was pretty much it. And then I brought it into, I think, InDesign to lay it all out with my scale bar. I should have had the scale bar actually here so I can match it up, but I don't know where it is. So that is how you get to a type of section like this. It has a good amount of detail for the scale. It has people, it has trees that are accurate to what kind of environment I wanted to create. And you can tell what is being cut through because it's dark black and what is in the background because it's gray. And I know you guys have a lot of sections to do, so that might be something you want to consider, is just doing them all in one file. So you can kind of copy and paste the assets over easily, or just have them all open at once. Work smarter, not harder.